But no, it's going to be the same lineups here. And yeah, Frozen starting on that fire comp. Again, I do want to watch more of this though, because I am very interested on if there's any set play patterns. Because to me, this fire comp, one of the strengths of it seems to be how flexible it is. I feel like every time I see it, I'm seeing different plays being made, and it's not just these sort of set in stone combinations.
Yeah, it's interesting how you bring up flexibility because, in my opinion, like the most flexible decks overall are the ones that have other openers, but there is definitely flexibility in what you bring in position for example, even if your
Yeah.
opener is the same every single time. And that is very much true. We saw Frozen play both Baron Geddon and Tavish in position 4 a while ago when he faced off versus Europe. Valera here seems to be in the tank about what kind of opener he should go for. He's only sure about going Samuro, but this looks like potentially the first shakeup we've seen from CN's openers since the start of the tournament. They have been playing standard opener every single time when they've been on stream, which is predictable to an extent, but they know the panouts of the standard inside and out. So there is now the chance that Karen Diablo comes out here, although that means that the Samuro doesn't necessarily have that much synergy, because in order to get Samuro's double strike to go off twice in a turn, you need the minion, the Merc you're targeting to have been damaged previously in the turn. And I got baited again, Raven.
Well, I will say though, it did look like Valera was eyeing up a different opening, and you know what worries me the most about that, and maybe rightly for his name as well, it must have been for his teammates' view as well, that he was going rogue, because surely, if you come up with a different opening against this specific comp, if you're like, okay, if it's this comp, then we should do it this way, right? Surely that's something you kind of agree on as a team, and you don't think about or you don't only start thinking about it as you're choosing which characters to play in game. So I would have been really surprised if he went for something else, something a little bit more wild there, especially you because you saw the weakness, right? Like without this, you mentioned, well, Samuro had hit the board. You cannot. I kind of wish you could, but you cannot pull heroes back off the board once you've placed them. So at that point, it's like, right, well, what procs Samuro? Nothing. Oh. And the next minute, well, if you just play Vol'jin and not Natalie with Vol'jin, it's like, right, well, my comp's just completely sliced up into little pieces that doesn't really achieve anything. So I do like him sticking with it, and we are going to see that very common now over today, Gia, that 10 health Diablo turn 1.
Right, because Valera went for the Anathema on turn 1, it means he is allowed to Benediction on turn 3, not on turn 2, because the whole point of full sending at Diablo is to give yourself the chance to win the speed tie versus the endurance aura. And if the Natalie's 3-speed Shadow Beam can snipe that Diablo before the aura goes off, Valera can't even look, but it's Frozen winning the speed tie, and he is shocked at that outcome. He goes for the Flurry here rather than the cold snap, because there just wasn't a snap setup from my perspective. So it's good to just make sure you can snipe or slow the one remaining minion for the next turn. Frozen loses his Diablo in exchange, but that is completely fine. It's essentially 2 mercs lost for 1. And now Valera will fight back with his own Karen Diablo combo, you'd have to imagine. But is there any room maybe to bring in Ragnaros instead? Because the Natalie looks like she's gonna die in the near future. So maybe Diablo can come out after an Earth Stomp is set up.
I can definitely see it because, and this is not necessarily correct, we've seen Frozen jump around with what's in that 4th position here, but I do think that, or at least I would expect to see Tavish, right? So then if you play Rag, you can potentially get some high damage on that Tavish, and then that makes the potential Diablo follow-up AoE even stronger, because then the highest health Mercenary on the other side of the board becomes a little bit more evened out, so there's a chance of being able to AoE them down. So I would have actually liked to see what the Rag play looks like, but I don't know if that's because Rag would be correct, or whether I just am curious and want to see how it would pan out.
Yeah. Okay, Valera here not going for Benediction even though it's active. I think it makes sense. The Benediction is essentially just healing Natalie from this position. You could think about it more if you could maybe proc the explosive trap, so you tank that damage and heal it back up with Benediction, but there's simply no way for that to pan out in the order that Valera wants and also gets enough damage done. So I think he's just accepting that Natalie's death is imminent, and he's just trying to get more damage on the Cairn. Natalie, because she's on Benediction right now, the Shadow Beam is only going to deal 20 to Cairn instead of the 32. But that is still enough for the first half of it to die to Fire Stomp, which is, I think, a guarantee. Frozen did not go for his explosive trap here, based on these speeds. Went for aim shot, snipes the Natalie, but honestly, I think Valeera is happy about that. Natalie would be so slow in this turn and not doing very much at all. But now Valeera gets to bring in a fresh Ragnaros, deal huge damage to that Tavish as well.
Yeah, that's true. The only problem, and again, I really like the snipe from Frozen because it means that he can now explosive trap into the Ragnaros turn, and you would imagine that the Rag is going to hit Tavish in some way, right? Whether it's any of the abilities, I guess. Okay, Die Insect is potentially a 1 in 3 at any given point, but generally speaking, you'd expect this explosive trap to go off. So I do like that he did hold it for this turn specifically, and we'll see what happens here now because of course the other two Mercenaries here for Valeera are that little bit slower because of the Varden. But what's good again for this timing for Valeera is when and if Varden dies, the freeze has no effect. The damage does still pop out. It's not like it negates the death rattle, but nothing's going to be frozen, so there's no like Mercenary going to have to skip a turn with Ragnaros sitting on the board there. But Frozen does still have two Mercenaries in the back pocket, and one of those is that Baron, right? So like there's a Cairn and a Ragnaros on board, and there's Baron in the pocket there for Frozen.
Yeah, it's a very big deal. And I think a potential trick that Valeera could go for here, not quite a clean setup that I could see, but the ideal situation is that you get rid of Tavish before the Baron ever hits the board. Actually, the setup is there though, right? Because you go Stomp and the Meteor. Potentially, you guaranteed also get rid of the Varden because of the splash damage, but he didn't even go Meteor, he just went Die Insect, and that is also a guaranteed setup if you get rid of the Cairn. Nicely done. Meteor still available for the next turn. And I was saying it was very important to get rid of Tavish before the Geddon comes on board, because that loses one potential proc on the fire combos here, right? The explosive trap could have proc the Magma Blast from Ragnaros and the Inferno. And the fact that Varden and Cairn are gone means that there's no like clean AoE that you can order right after the Living Bomb to deal damage to the entire board. However, Frozen's Mercs are still very healthy, and he can maybe get a Die Insects of his own here. Although the Diablo is a little bit too healthy, right?
Will he not want to Living Bomb Meteor this turn? Does that not work out very well if you Living Bomb the Cairn and then Meteor the Diablo?
Yeah, that works out very nice. Good.
I think that works out pretty well. It kills Diablo and the Cairn with the splash, right?
And that means that Cairn will not move this turn, and Valeera only has the Ragnaros remaining, which can deal a maximum of 22 DPS. Good spot. I think that would be locking out the game in Frozen's favor.
Yeah, Cairn and Diablo won't move this turn, right? With these speeds, like that's absolutely huge. Yeah, there's Living Bomb. Should be the Meteor on the Diablo, yep.
Absolutely.
And that looks insane. The splash damage clearing everything up. There's only the Cairn left, and I'll tell you right now, that Cairn is not winning any games from that point. So, quick 1-0 for Frozen, and honestly, as soon as this is over, I'm not even sleeping. I'm going to play some Geddon on ladder because this is pretty cool. This comp looks sweet.
Yeah, I think Windfish is... I don't know if he created the deck, but he certainly mastered it, and he was rank 1 on CN Merc's ladder for a reason. I mean, I'm pretty sure he still is. The MMRs submitted for this tournament were taken like very far in advance, like with the exception of me, who said, I'm embarrassed of my MMR, please give me more days to climb a bit before I submit it. But I'm pretty sure Windfish has only climbed even more since then. And it's clear to see how Windfish and Valeera were able to cooperate really well. So a bit more trivia, I guess, about Team CN is that they had this whole collaborative effort, I heard, in order to come up with the lineup and practice together. The casters were part of that as well, the Chinese casters, and they also know these matchups extremely well. And I think that's really cool that they have an active Mercs community over there. It's clear why they came up with a lineup that seems to be infallible at the moment. I am still a firm believer in the Jaina deck if Surrender's on it, but I have to say the Baron Geddon is very sick.
Yeah, whereas if you want a true representation of the EU side of that kind of teamwork, Hunter Ace did message me at one point, asking if I wanted to practice, and then I said, sure, let me know when, and then just didn't message me back. So that's how the teamwork goes over in Europe, and maybe one of the reasons why we are not in the finals, who knows. But yeah, that's it's really cool, and I think especially, I mean, this helps in all game modes, of course, but I think in Mercenaries, because one, every player doesn't have maxed accounts, right, of every single maxed character. I'm talking about on their personal accounts. So having a big practice group is important because it takes a while to test things and get a real good feel for matchups. Whereas if you have people you trust, say, okay, here's this deck, you play the matchup of this one like this, and you can say, like, I trust you as a good player, so I won't then have to try other things, right? You just take their word for it, and then you execute. So I think that's clearly has been at worst a help, right? Whether it's been super impactful or not, it's definitely a lot better than having a very narrow practice group.
Absolutely. It takes a village to test Mercs because there's just so many different panouts, so many different Mercs that you can build into a comp, and all these lineup restrictions and rules we had just made it so difficult to figure out the 4 best decks. And when you have more people kind of supporting you and telling you that what your testing is done is supported by our testing as well, it's just like peer review and academia, then you can feel more confident that what you've been doing is right. Because, for example, me and Surrender, we had the same Sylvanas deck submitted even before China kind of revealed that, and it became the most banned deck in the tournament. But, you know, honestly, before we saw all the other deck lists, we thought that was the weakest deck in our lineup. We thought, okay, we have to submit something that isn't Karen Diablo. I guess it's going to be this. It was the best we could come up with. And we thought people would be banning Shadow Samuro because it was the best deck on ladder at the time. But the tournament meta completely flipped on its head. We learned that on the fly, and I think Team CN knew that from the beginning, and that's what's most impressive about their practice, on top of the very consistent play when it comes to standard openers.
Yeah, and I do love that, like, because this Anduin deck has been banned, I would love to know really whether it's been banned this much because it's literally the best, right? It's the highest chance of any of these decks getting a single win, which is all they can do, of course, in this Conquest format, or whether it's just such a pain to play against that people are just like, I don't want to work this out. Stuff's healing all the time, health totals are changing all the time, there's 2 apes on the board that I don't want to deal with, you know, I don't want to add up how much attack Sylvanas is going to get. I don't want to have a draw potential if Sylvanas ends up, you know, having the death rattle to then draw a game. I do wonder if it's because it's good or because it's annoying, and if it's because it's annoying, I like the deck even more.
Well, it's not ideal. The deck is certainly not infallible. I believe nature is just favored whether you run Guff or Samuro, if played correctly. And by correctly, I mean not how I played when I faced it with nature. And it's not completely infallible to Shadow Samuro. Certainly still favored, but you have to be very aware of what the Shadow Samuro player is trying to brew up on the other side. It's a tough deck to play. And I was thinking potentially maybe CN could get an edge by leaving that up on the America side, because they haven't played a single game of it on stream ever since they submitted it. It was copy pasted, so you have to assume they didn't even really know or test the deck that much prior to the submission. And I was thinking maybe Team China could get some play advantage by leaving that deck up, but they didn't want to take the risk. Fair enough.
And honestly, with how busy and how long these days have been, even if they have tested it, how many games could they honestly have played, right? Like, you know, these people, as you well know, of course, you need to sleep. The competition goes long. So even if they obviously resubmitted it, it was a new deck to that team. How many actual reps of the different matchups could you have even got in over the weekend? So I do think leaving it up, if I think China leaving it open there for Americas would have been potentially either very funny or very successful if they went for it, but unfortunately not the case. But also there's the flip side, right, where because it seems that the Chinese community and just these players specifically have really jumped on Mercenaries and obviously are very, very good at the game. I think it's also reasonable where they're just like, we'll just outplay them. Like,
Fair
it's
enough.
fine, because if we're playing mirror matches, they probably have overall more reps, and at least across the board of how wide their practice group is. So I would imagine they would just be okay with saying, let's just beat them fair and square. Let's play mirror matches if they want. We're just better.
I mean, we have different definitions of fair and square because I think that Luna and Frozen, even though they've had to adapt on the fly and learn some decks that they didn't originally submit, have been playing, for the most part, the standard openers very, very well. And there's just a lot of flips when it happens, right? The speed ties are so huge in those. We did see maybe the cracks starting to show in Luna's armor a while ago, but that could change now, right? Her teammate is back on board. That's a huge morale booster. And Frozen did just get a very convincing win in game one. Everything could turn around from this point. And that's just another layer to this competition, just the fact that it's a team environment, even within one discipline, Mercs, pairs, right? And then it's a team environment as you're playing for your entire region. And that can be some serious motivation if you're with a player that you really respect, which is, in my case with Surrender, I was tryharding because that's a player I have really respected since the beginning. For Luna and Frozen, you have to imagine the mutual trust and respect is there as well because they've been top level constructed players forever now.
Oh, 100%. Two of the best from the Americas region, like without even a question. You definitely put them both up there. So really, really impressive overall. But let's dive into that game number 2. It's going to be the unlosable comp here for Windfish, although I seem to struggle beforehand, or at least that was Valero, I suppose. He's going to be playing this one on the bottom, and then obviously Luna subbing in there on this Nature Samuro opening. Diablo looking a little bit below the 10 health we're used to against the Shadow lineup, so definitely going to be batting the dust next term. But is there anything that Windfish can do to try and get something out of Diablo right now, or is it just going to be too slow?
It's the flippery-do once again of the endurance aura. Yep. Endurance aura versus muddy footing. I was just gonna say from turn 1, I was a bit surprised to see Luna go for muddy footing rather than lightning bolt. On turn 1, they both deal 10 damage. It's the same, but you don't really get any benefit from the slow effect because Diablo is not dead that turn no matter what you do, and it's always just gonna be slower in the Brucon in the first place. So that slow effect is somewhat wasted. The only reason I can think for of going muddy footing is if Windfish, you thought he would go for a mind game and try and target Brucon a bit more heavily, but he's just never done that so far in these panouts.
Right.
That I think it could have potentially been a free lightning bolt for Luna there, and she could have set up that nature damage. But the more important thing is obviously whether that Brucon can snipe the Diablo on this turn.
Yeah, it is tough though as well because again, I haven't sat and done that because there's so much maths to do and I hate it, but I've not sat and done it. But you do wonder because that is the nature damage, which means also if the lightning bolt did come down, then Malfurion is also dealing more damage, right? So that is definitely something you'd have to consider going forward, and if that was a slight misstep or not. But we can see so far Luna's just working out exactly where she wants to aim. It does look like a bit of a mixed bag. This Malfurion looks like it's queuing the AoE heal, I believe.
She wins the flip! And Windfish knows that he's in big trouble because of that. I think the nature deck, even if they lose the flip, not everything is dying, and they get a lot of the time big heal just from Malfurion either surviving and having that weapon heal in increments of 6 across the board, or go for the big Archdruid's call. But obviously this is the disaster scenario for Windfish, where Luna has deleted Diablo without it dealing almost any damage. And I think Windfish went for the snap there rather than the flurry, and so Luna is at full speed here. Not speed up because she did not go for Cenarian Surge with Malfurion the turn before, but can still move everything under Windfish's moves if Luna prefers.
And just to add layers of problems on for Windfish here, obviously, like you said, not sped up, just like natural speed for Luna, but also that heal from Malfurion almost reset the game. It's almost close to just saying, well, Luna just got to delete a mercenary for free this game, because 72 on Samuro, okay, not max health, but pretty high. The 60 on Malfurion as well is solid, and of course, Prokan sitting there on 90. Like, that is absolutely huge. And I might be wrong here, but when we saw the tweet with like the ranked mercenaries and their ability use sort of ranked as well, the Archdruid Call was up there as I think maybe even the highest win rate ability or whatever it was. I saw it the other day, so I can't remember exactly. But you can see that, yes, you can't always afford to get the big AoE heal off with Malfurion, but when you do, it has such a widespread impact on how the game looks, because all of that chip damage set up over the past turn or so from Windfish has more or less gone away at this point.
I will say, though, that win rates and mercs do have a bit of disclaimer on them in such a way that just because it's highest win rate doesn't mean it's the best skill and it's the one you should be using most often. Yeah. I think some people might just get confused by that. I know you know this, Raven.
I am only going to use this move. And it's just like, I'm going to wait 2 turns and then use the AoE heal. It strictly wins more games.
It's the same reason why Samuro isn't like one of the highest rated mercs on win rate ladder, I believe, because he's in so many comps. He's a free merc that you get at the beginning and beginners can play, that you're gonna have so many people, almost everybody running Samuro, but a lot of people probably making mistakes or not having the best lineup to support him available, even though he is probably the best individual merc in the game right now, in my opinion. Anyway, back to the game. Windfish is going for Endurance Aura into the Wombo combo of Living Bomb with the equipment on the Geddon, which means it's 24 AoE doubled up to 48 on Reds, and the activation of the Flurry. And I think that's the perfect breakpoint to kill Malfurion at 60, because the Flurry's dealing 12, right? Because of the critical damage.
Yeah, that should work out very well. Let's see, with the Living Bomb in the middle, no true surprise there.
Bam, bam!
So much damage, it's so sick.
It is indeed. Chain Lightning
and also,
for Luna.
In a roundabout way, not a terrible thing for the Cairn to be on the receiving end of that Chain Lightning. It sounds weird, but because Cairn was so low health anyway, it soaked 32 of that damage when it just had 9 health regardless. So that at least soaked something, even though it was dead no matter what happened. So did get some spread of damage across to Varden and Geddon, of course. But now both players have to decide what's coming in next. The old Cairn set up potentially for Luna, especially because there's no cookie snipe available. So I imagine it's going to be the case. And then we see the Tavish drop down here for Windfish just to start potentially getting these snipes cooking, or maybe even here, and a explosive trap just because of how low Samuro is.
Yeah, I do love the Cairn from Luna here because her Samuro is very likely to die this turn. So sometimes you go Cairn and you set up the Earth Stomp and you feel bad because like, oh wait, I don't have space to bring in Diablo next turn. But that Samuro, she can double send it into any of these mercs and have it die, right? Because it's only at 14. I guess it goes up to 18 with the Burning Blade, so it's not necessarily the case, but the Samuro living is going to continue to be a threat for Windfish. The Brukan, although slowed, can still activate Double Strike by using the Muddy Footing because Samuro is also slowed. And because I don't see a way for Cairn to die this turn from Luna, I think she should still go for Earth Stomp most of the time.
I think so. It's that mindset, right, of, well, nothing too crazy is going to happen this turn, so just set up a stronger turn next. Normally, if you're expecting one of your mercenaries to get killed, it's less about what's the best immediate thing right now, but what's the best setup for whatever you're going to pull from the bench. And of course, we know the usual suspect that's going to come from the bench after you've already played Cairn. So we'll have to see how it pans out here. But no true surprise to see the explosive trap coming down from Windfish. But Samuro does get that attack in, and bye-bye goes Geddon.
Pretty interesting for Luna to go Aura instead of what I would say is the expected Earth Stomp. But clever, right? Because if you go Earth Stomp there, and Windfish had gone for the Tavish explosive trap, your Samuro is actually dead before ever getting to move by virtue of the slow that happened last turn. So I think Luna here is trying to eke a little bit more value off of the Samuro, and then she brings in Diablo. But there's an opportunity for Windfish to punish potentially if he can kill this first half of Cairn before an Earth Stomp comes out. Although I think Luna identified that, you know, at 63, there's just not enough DPS to do that. Cookie,
Yeah, I
though.
think that's just fair, right? I think it's kind of weird, right? With this move over and not the expected outcome of bringing Diablo down is definitely a knock-on effect from that endurance aura. So I think it's definitely the moving over to the stomp. But now, is this just going to be too low damage a turn from Luna for it to be a big deal? I guess there is just a whole Diablo left in the background, so
Yeah.
that might just be enough to push Windfish out.
It's such an interesting position because the Brukan, on one hand, Luna kind of wants it to die to make room for the Diablo, especially since she's Earth Stomping this turn. But on the other hand, if Windfish leaves that up, the Brukan then has Chain Lightning active again next turn, right? Which can deal major damage to the Ragnaros, which Windfish cleverly did not put in the middle. Nicely done. But the thing is, maybe if Windfish can put the Brukan in a range where it can be sniped before it goes for Chain Lightning next turn. That would be the ideal situation. Ooh. But he's actually going for the Ice Lance to win a speed tie versus Earth Stomp, and that's major that he did win it here. Oh.
Oh, he hit the cairn. I think he was really looking for the hit on the cookie there. I do like the Ice Lance. That is a cheeky move you've got to keep your eye open for. I think a lot of people act like that move doesn't exist on Varden, but it can really make a big difference, especially if you're not searching for specific damage that turn and more trying to just delay a big setup. But the problem is with the Ice Lance used now, it means there's no slows on the other side of the board. So Luna can now set up for this big Diablo turn here. There is still the freeze from Varden though, which is important, right? Like there's no Ragnaros for Luna, so it means whatever gets frozen stays frozen for the next turn.
Yep, it's the terrific trio on board for Luna there, thanks to our producer for coming up with the appropriate adjective, because the combo here is Aura into Go Fish into the Fire Stomp, and the Fire Stomp gets buffed by the fact that there's another Merc or character summon that has not moved yet in that turn. The Tavish can of course go under the Endurance Aura with the Explosive Trap, so Luna gets to get 4 procs of Earth Stomp if she summons the Fire Stomp. That deals 24 to Tavish and Rag. It likely kills Cookie on the back swing because of the Explosive Trap procking, and it deals 48 to the Varden, which is enough to kill. I think it looks pretty good here, even though you lose the Cookie in the process. There's a couple fish that could maybe also make a difference here. Alright, here we go.
Let's see which way it is. Oh, deal damage.
Alright. I wonder if that gives any break points. Diablo
that's a problem.
Is the frozen one though. Ay ay ay.
This is still a problem, right? Because Kane's just normal attack can actually just kill Rag, which is surely the play. Does that ever work out well enough? I'm not sure.
Did I miss a bleed move used at some point, Raven? I'm sorry. I'm not sure what the lightning bolt on the Ragnaros is, but I can only imagine that's bleed as an effect on it right now. But I don't know.
Does that show up for the freeze resist, I think, right?
Oh, does it? Okay.
Is that what that is? And you've made me question myself now. So
I'm so sorry. Yeah.
We might both look very stupid, which is absolutely fine. I am very used to it, at least. I've trained for years to be okay with looking stupid. I think it's the freeze resist and the plus health equipment that shows that, but I could well be wrong.
Yeah, I know Tavish has it for the stacking chops equipment, so let's just assume there's no bleed. Okay, so Luna goes Earth Stomp here, kills Drag, because Windfish simply doesn't have a way to kill Cairn before it can move this turn. Deals 20 to the Tavish. So I think Luna has this. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't see the bear taking a victory here. However mighty they may be, it's not going to be quite enough. And Luna takes game number 2. And I don't know how much we've really sort of nailed this down for how the game modes will work out going forward in this finals, but currently we're looking at if Americas can get this win, they will only need the victory in battle, like the initial sort of 3 lobbies of the battlegrounds, right, to take the whole thing. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, of course, because I might stumble. But if China takes this second victory, manages to reverse sweep this match to then go 2-0 in Mercenaries, it means that there's a few things potentially up for grabs, right? Because it'll be a point each either side, so that it'll be 2 each either side. So then it'll be pretty spicy overall. So it is still going to come down to battlegrounds either way, but still, it looks like America's are on the right track to recover from that first series there with Luna taking the loss.
Yeah, that's right. Just to catch up anybody who's not aware of how the points breakdown works for this finals, it's actually just the same as every individual region versus region we've been doing since before as well, which is the constructed BO5s each award 1 point. And what happened so far is Americas went 2-0 versus CN, so they have 2 points there. And the Merc series also award points in that same way. And so far, CN is up 1-0 in Merc. So right now it's 2-1 with 1 more point able to be gained on either side. And if that point goes to Americas, the 2 points all or nothing you get from BGs can mean that China can still tie from that point by winning the 3 BGs lobbies overall. And then we would have to play a tiebreaker BG lobby. However, if Americas wins this last series of Mercs, they go up to... However, if China wins this last series of Mercs, they tie it all at 2-2. And that would mean that whoever wins that first set of 3 BG's lobbies wins the entire tournament.
Yep. So still a lot on the line for these matches going forward, and I am hyped to watch BGs. It's not normally by any means the mode I specialize in, but I do think it's been super fun. I'm not looking forward to all the the bragging already I can hear from the Americas team. Honestly, probably whether they win in the finals or not, we're going to hear all the bragging of, they did do very well in the BGs, I'll give them that. But I'll just wait till we get back into GM at some point and be like, no, EU is better. So, but yeah, it's been a really good show overall, and I know especially Sotil and Lorinda have been greatly enjoying casting all those lobbies for you guys, and they will be up next with that. So if you're a huge fan of Battlegrounds, that's going to be coming up when we're done with this series. But so far, Gia, who are you putting on to win this? Obviously, Americas have a big lead in this match, but do you think China's got what it takes to come back?
Okay, before I give you my prediction there, I would like to add my own comments to the bragging rights thing, because I will not let APAC be outdone. We have the best score in Constructed after the round robin was over. And let me tell you, the World Championship is in Constructed, and 2 of our players in our Constructed team are playing in the World Championship versus Gabby, who will also be playing in the World Championship, who did not get as many points in total in Constructed. So, haha, APAC looking good to win Worlds this year. Anyway, prediction? I think China's
until Gabby actually wins Worlds, but okay, carry on. You may carry
on. I think China will win the series, even though currently Americas are up 2-0, right? So far, Frozen and Luna both took wins. I think China just know the decks too well. They created the lineup, and I just don't find it right on a moral level that the team that would take their decks like very, very recently could beat them with it. It's not logical at all, but that's the stand I'm taking.
Well, I'd like to make an official announcement now. The Team China have absolutely 0 chance at winning this series, as Gia's predictions have put the final nail in the coffin, and it is no doubt going to be in America's win for this final match of Mercenaries, not only for the day, but for the tournament, of course, as we do finish on Battlegrounds after this. So I am pretty excited to get into it. The players are just getting ready as we went through the list there. But yeah, there's just a lot to play, and one thing I think we know for sure, even just from seeing all of the competitors' tweets, yourself included, is that there's a lot still to learn in this mode, regardless of, we saw the announcement video earlier where there's some buffs coming, there's some additional potential speed changes coming to abilities, there's obviously new mercenaries coming at some point to shake up the meta, but regardless of all that, I think even if we just looked at a snapshot of how things are now, it's pretty safe to say no one's got a true 100% handle on this game mode yet, so I'm looking forward to see how things change going forward.
Mercenaries, the meta for this tournament did kind of solve itself in such a way that because there was so little time to figure out resubmission after the patch hit, that two of the teams defaulted to copying other teams that seem to have more solid lineups overall, and that's why we've ended up in this situation where it does somewhat seem solved. But even then, Valera is shaking it up with an alternate opener with the Cookie and Diablo in the opener for the Mirror, which I believe is something that Team EU pioneered in the earlier days of this tournament.
And Valera is just a maverick, isn't he? Because this is the old Cookie opening is not something you see too often, at least. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this pans out. What's the reasoning here, Gia? Like, what's the breakdown? What is Cookie bringing to this opening lineup here for Valera?
Yeah, I just find it super interesting that Valera chose to do this. I guess because there is the full information now that the only deck remaining for Americas is the Shadow Samurai, you do have now the opportunity to go for interesting openers, so that makes sense. The Cookie in the front line kind of means that the Samurai doesn't actually have that great of a target in terms of critical damage, right? Because Vol'jin, you're super happy to get rid of because it just represents such a big threat by being so fast every turn later on. And on top of that, the Cookie Fish Feast here is able to proc the Samurai, guaranteed, because it is it is faster than Vol'jin's skill 1, which is the only skill capable of slowing any mercs at this point. However, I'm unsure if Luna is actually supposed to go for Cookie. I don't think she can kill Diablo though, so we'll just see what happens.
Yeah, it's super weird though, right? Because, I mean, so Vol'jin was obliterated there from Valera, which is kind of to be expected here. But the strange thing is, like, you could see Luna going for Diablo, which again, Diablo is a threat. It makes sense. Because if you kill Cookie, does the board actually just get better after that point, right? It's really tricky, right? You spend all that whole turn beefing up and killing Cookie, and then Valera just brings on a stronger mercenary for this point in the game on the board with a relatively full health Diablo. So I think that's why Luna focused this, but Cookie does start to stack some things up, right? Starting to drop those like the Go Fish nice and early in the game, or start just chipping away with that 10 damage every single turn, almost guaranteed, with it being at 2 speed. So yeah, I'm pretty interested to see how this pans out, as Diablo is low health for Valera, but still Valera does have a I think an overall speed advantage here just with this Cookie.
Yeah,
go for that 50-50, right?
Yeah, Natalie did get slowed by the Doom charge, so yes, he does have that big speed advantage. I'm just kind of having some flashbacks because I believe it was Surrender on our Shadow Sam when he faced Europe and they went for this weird opener with the Cookie there, and I think he did bring in Karen on position 4, and it didn't end up panning out so well. Obviously not to say that the same thing's going to happen to Luna. Perhaps she'll make much different decisions than Surrender did at that point, but I was honestly wondering if this was a spot for Ragnaros, because the Diablo and the Samurai are pretty vulnerable to Meteor. However, there's the other thing you have to think about is Rag dead if I just bring it out this turn, because the Samurai can deal 51 to it, Cookie can deal 20 to it, and then Rag can deal Apocalypse to it, all before Meteor ever happens. So that's a risk as well. Okay, Luna deciding what to do with her Natalie here, which is very, very slow, but I think is a low priority target for Valera here. So in this position, if you think they're gonna leave up one of your mercs, you can maybe get super greedy with it and go for like the AoE as the highest max damage.
Yeah.
But Valera actually prioritizes Natalie here. Very interesting stuff, because now that leaves an opportunity for Luna to go for her own Diablo while mercs have been earth stomped.
Yeah, and weirdly enough, I find those decisions, just touched on the Natalie decision there from Luna, the decisions of what ability to use when your mercenary is going last and has like not a lot of health and is very likely to die are like strangely difficult, right? Because you need to think what happens if to cause Natalie not to die, and then that's how you work out what spell you should lock in. And because it doesn't come up too often, because normally it does die and you never get to find out what that outcome really looks like, it's super hard to even make like the correct decisions that never matter, which is a very strange thing to say. But we are going to see the Ken come out from Valera and the Diablo here from Luna. So Valera has a very weird looking board, right? This is not common in any way. I honestly, I played a lot of Mercs and watched a lot of Mercs, and I would not even know where to start here if I was actually sat in Valera's chair playing this game.
To touch on your point a while ago, it's really just all about what you think your opponent will do and whether you're going to go all in on that read or if you're going to try and split moves to go for the 2 different lines you think you could take, or like 3 different lines. It's so difficult, but reading is the most important skill to have here. And Luna, once again, has to make a read. Does she think that Valera will go for a speed tie aura to try and beat the Earth Stomp? We can see Valera is not willing to take that speed tie. He's going for Earth Stomp of his own. Because I think all of his Mercs survived to the Fire Stomp AoE here from the Diablo. So not including the Samro damage, which Luna did end up going for, so good spot from her there. But I think it still works out okay for Valera because Karen's still healthy, everything's slow on the other side, and he can come in now with the bench Malfurion. I just haven't seen this in such a long time.
Yeah, I've seen it now and again on ladder in different comps as well, just various places, mainly stuff including Anduin if you go in heavy blue open, and then you can bring Malfurion in afterwards to still help out with the AoE healing effects to buff Anduin. But generally speaking, yes, Malfurion is one of the go-to openers in any given comp. What is cool about this though is, well, or at least what it should be the plan here for Valera, is to try and tidy up the 2 greens on the board, right? If he can deal with Samuro and Diablo, or at least mostly deal with them, definitely deal with one, then suddenly this Brucan off the bench is huge, right? Because there's still the leftover bits of after Ken's reincarnation, and then 1 more red for Luna. So if you just pull out a Brucan last thing and just pop off with Chain Lightning straight away, if you feel the need to, it is an absolute ton of damage if it starts chaining between double reds.
Problem for Valera here, though, is that his highest DPS is the Samuro, which is also about to die, so you'd love for it to get in 1 last double strike, 1 last mirror image as the impactful thing, which you kind of feel you almost got for free because it's at 3 health. But there's a ton in the way, so it's really hard to arrange that. The Malfurion is slowed, it came off the bench, so it still needs to take a turn to set up the nature speed up. And so, like, Valera cannot arrange for his Samuro to snipe down Luna's Samuro on the other side, unless he goes double strike, which he did go for after the Cenarian surge here.
Yes, yeah. I was wondering as well if I was trying to just work out whether it was ever worth the AoE, but I think for that to happen, then Valera would realistically have to go for the Endurance Aura instead. But yeah, this ordering means that the snipe on the Cairn with the Malfurion happens, which then removes the taunt for the effect. Oh, he did go for the AoE last second. I didn't even see that. But this just keeps the Samuro alive and lets him maybe now get another mirror off as well. Also, this Stomp, a sort of weird secret tech between Malfurion and Cairn, is this Stomp is now 2 speed because of the nature buff, and Stomp is nature. Very similar to like the interaction with Mukla that we see a lot as well, is like 2 of Mukla's abilities are actually nature, so they speed up to like stupid numbers.
I think that's so clever from Valera here, because usually the punish you do for like putting the AoE on Samuro and having it be at a very low health is if you get slowed that turn by an Earth Stomp on the other side, and then suddenly your Samuro's just sitting there buffing Fire Stomp for the next turn. But because Valera knew he was 100% going to be able to kill Cairn from Luna's side before it even moved last turn, that he was not going to be slowed for this turn. In fact, he's gotten speeded up by the Malfurion ability for all the nature skills. And now the Samuro has the chance to win a speed tie versus the Endurance Aura. And if that happens, Valera can get a clear on both the greens here. And even if Luna wins the speed tie, I think it still works out very well for Valera, because Luna's Samuro cannot snipe off anything but Samuro on the other side, which is like the least relevant minion here. But the Malf is even just going to heal everything up, and Luna is down to her very last Merc against 4. That is simply not going to work out. So clean from Valera.
that was so creative to watch, right? Like, what was that opening from Valera at all? And it just worked out. Like, it was super clean, really well done reads there. I loved the way the Samuro usage, because that Samuro should have been dead about 20 turns ago, it feels like. But he really did just milk the most out of that character, getting the AoE, letting it survive for another turn, because if you can ever land that AoE and survive, like, what would have been guaranteed damage to kill it off, that means you always have that mirror image follow-up, which at 3 speed is one of the, like, by far the faster abilities in the game. Even if the AoE that turn achieves something, and then you flip a coin, right, for the mirror image against your opponent, well, that's still more than you had before, right? Like, that is still more damage on average than you had by just letting Samuro die that turn. So I think that was really, really well played there from Valera. And there's some pretty creative plays overall, just how to approach that matchup and how to mix up that comp, because with some of the openings that you don't normally see.
And I got confused, admittedly, sorry, because when EU went for that cookie opener, they were actually on Shadow Samuro, and that was when they submitted cookie in their Shadow Samuro, and that's not the case for China, right? The cookie indicated that they were clearly on the nature comp. Sorry about missing that. But it's cool to see that that works with the nature comp as well, potentially, if your opponent is not expecting it, or maybe Team China have just labbed it out from that position and found that they have, you know, very favored a position, even if Americas knows their most likely lines from there. It didn't even look close. I think it was more percentage points gained on the opener and just continuing to get that advantage stacked by making good decisions every turn. And when all of those things add up together, that's the type of game where you see it ends up 4 mercs to 1. And it just looks like a complete blowout. Looking good for Team CN. They've done something unexpected now that they have the full information. I wonder if they're going to go for a creative opener in the Shadow Samuro mirror, or we could see Windfish once again on his undefeated fire comp.
Yeah, I will say that in the Shadow Samuro mirror, I find that one incredible. Like, if we see something different with that, with the openings, I'll be very surprised. And if it wins, I'll be extremely impressed. Because I think that Shadow Samuro is one off, if not the hardest comp to move around, right? To sort of shift the openings with, because the 2 sections of it works like so cleanly together. It's hard to break that up. So we'll see if that pans out or not. But overall, it's a great first step for China, of course. And you said you think China are more than capable of pulling this one back, even at a tough spot, because I do think you are right. I think, weirdly enough, in Conquest, knowing your opponents, it's not like in Standard where, well, you know the deck list, but yeah, that doesn't really change too much anyway. You know the deck list as soon as you see what portrait your hero is at the start of the game. Whereas here, the openings that are flexible do change based on what you're facing, and because China know exactly what they're queuing into, when they will know that every single game of this series now, it will make a potential impact, at least on some of the comps as we've seen.
For sure. I think, you know, I was wondering how China could get an edge, because they knew as soon as America's qualified to finals that they would be facing a complete mirror in the Mercs lineups, from the equipment down to every single Merc and down to the standard openers, right? So from that position, how are you supposed to gain an edge? Do you change the ban? That's one of the things I potentially brought up, because Team Americas have never played the Sylvanas deck on stream, and I think that deck, while it looks very powerful, can be outplayed if they don't have enough reps on it necessarily. But instead, China have gone for a situation where even if they have to tank the O2, losing to some speed ties potentially to the first 2 decks, they're just gonna prey on the Shadow Samuro, just like the target strategy in Conquest. Although it is a lot different to look at in Mercenaries. So far, China have had favorables because of the different opener. But here it is, the Shadow Samuro mirror, and we've said there's very little room to shift around the opener, so I'm really curious to see what Valera and Windfish can pull out of the bag here.
Yeah, I'd love to see it. I personally think that there's not enough wiggle room here. It doesn't really feel like you can break up the difference between the shadow pieces as well as just the combos for the late game as well. But if anyone's going to find it, it's going to be these players, right? We are watching some of the best currently at Mercenaries, so pretty excited to see how this one pans out as we take a look at some more of these minions. But Mercenaries, sorry, that is a tough habit to break, especially when you're casting different modes in the same tournament. 1 minute I've got to say minions, 1 minute Mercenaries, 1 minute minion types, or whatever we're calling them in Battlegrounds. It's too much to handle. But yeah, these two specifically, I still remember the days where Tamsin was also involved in a lot of comps as well. With the shadow bonuses there, with stacking shadow damage. There you go, perfect. And I think Tamsin could well come back. The only problem is, when I was facing tons of the Anduin comp on ladder, well, here we go. I finished my story very quickly. I did try the Tamsin to slow down the heals, and it did not work. So anyway, story over. Let's dive onto this. The shadow comp has been split up. It's Diablo in the opening, taking the place of Natalie Celine.
I'm so hype about this. Okay, I said that if China were willing to gain an edge, they could go for a non-standard opener, because if you go for the standards, you get a lot of speed ties and things get left up to chance for a good degree, right? We've seen that so many times when it's not down to the last deck. But because the full information is there, you don't get punished necessarily for going for non-standard openers. However, I can see a big potential problem with this opener, which is that Vol'jin still speed ties with Vol'jin, and Vol'jin has a slow ability on the Shadow Shock. So if Luna's Vol'jin hits Windfish's Vol'jin first, that means that Windfish's Samuro does not get to proc the double strike. The Samuro will die. The Vol'jin will die before that can even get damage on the opposing Vol'jin. So I think this still has a very important flip on turn 1 if Luna decides to go after the Vol'jin. However, that maybe Windfish is accounted for that already and says that, okay, you kill my Vol'jin, yours is alive, but fine, I get to bring in Cairn while I have Diablo on the board. Is that just good enough? And now Luna has to think about that, and does she ever target Diablo because of it?
Yeah, exactly. And also bearing in mind, Diablo being on board, this is a Black Soulstone Diablo, not the Doomclaw that you're used to seeing in Diablo Opens this tournament. So yes, even if Vol'jin dies or things go wrong, Diablo will gain health. And then, like you said, the Cairn follow-up could make all the difference, especially Saturn against 2 blues. So, yeah, I'm very excited to see this here as the damage is done, but the Diablo is the focus from Luna. So already, this opening has gone flying straight out the window because of this different start here from Windfish.
I think this is super clever from Luna, where she did prevent the Samuro from getting the double strike full damage, but she also sent damage at Diablo, right? So she's kind of dividing up the damage here, making sure she can get rid of the Diablo on the next turn just by using Mirror Image from the Samuro, which will still buff up to 22 because of the Burning Blade equipment. Such a clean break point here. And the only move that can go under that is Vol'jin from Windfish. And I think it is very important to go for that either 1 or 2 speed thing here, so that the opposing Vol'jin on Luna's side dies and thus buffs the Diablo up to 32 because of the Black Soulstone. And if Luna's thinking about that, she might have to commit the Natalie as well to get rid of the Diablo.
Yeah, this is just causing very strange problems for Luna, which no doubt it would with a different opening. And I do love this though, because the slows are kind of all over the place right now. Although Diablo's Doom Charge is generally regarded as the weakest move, sometimes it has the highest impact if you're planning out these sort of disjointed turns, if you can ensure that it goes last compared to the minion you're hitting. So we'll see how this one goes here. Funnily enough, Windfish isn't going to be going for the AoE, the 1-speed Shadow. He's going to go for the 2. Didn't want to take the 50-50 there.
50-50 versus what? Sorry.
Well, it would be speed 1, right? And Natalie's was speed 1 as well on the other side.
Natalie's beam? Yeah. But that didn't kill Diablo on its own, so I think it's fine
to
go for Shadow Shock there.
Well, I
think it's
was going to say
actually
as well. Yeah, because this lines up the ability to then go for the AoE this turn with potentially Natalie on board as well if he wants. With the shadow weakness that it applies first.
It's just such a big deal in terms of overall DPS to save that Curse of Weakness to potentially go with Natalie, because suddenly you're dealing 34 AoE if you have both those abilities lined up. And I think Windfish knew that the Shadow Shock was enough to get rid of Vol'jin anyway, unless Luna wanted to go for the healing spell with Natalie on it, which is obviously a very, very low value use of Natalie. She almost never does that. And so I think it's a good read from Windfish there. He doesn't actually bring out the Natalie of his own, though. Chooses to start setting up Cairn instead. And now that Shadow Weakness is just being applied for AoE on fresh targets. And that's still a reason to save it.
Yeah, I was going to say, what if it's the actual shock this turn for Vol'jin? Like, shock the Ken, potentially? Do you think that Luna would go for the speed into the AoE here, or do you think that's never a play, therefore Windfish is never going to go for that?
So hard to talk in nevers and always in Mercenaries. But
Sure, you know what I mean, not literally.
yeah, but I think in most situations, Luna would end up on the Earth Stomp here, because if I were in her place, I'd be thinking, okay, this Vol'jin can go under my Endurance Aura, right? So even if I play that, the Samro can also speed tie it, and sometimes the Stomp only goes off for one here, the Fire Stomp, I mean, from Diablo. So
Yeah.
I'd be inclined to set up an Earth Stomp here, and if Windfish has made that read, then he can potentially just go for something else. But in that world, the Shadow Shock doesn't actually slow anything, because everything else is moving after the Shadow Shock anyway. So it still ends up being the AoE.
That sounds right to me.
Oh, she did go for the Aura. Very interesting. And because Windfish went for a slower Samuro move, there was no chance to speed tie the Endurance Aura there. It's just all these back and forth reads, right? It's all about what you think your opponent will do. The Stomp ended up working out decently for Luna there, because Windfish got he prioritized playing a slower Samuro move. It guaranteed more Stomps for Luna.
Yeah, it was a solid amount of just overall AoE damage for Windfish that turn, right? The Diablo only on 50 health, the Ken 30. Like these minions, these mercenaries, are very killable. And it's still looking good, even though I will say, last mercenary off bench, Natalie is one of the weaker mercenaries you can pull off at the very end there. So even though Windfish does have that extra mercenary on the bench, it's fairly low impact, I would say, with no speed buff from Vol'jin, and the moves without that are fairly weak and slow, especially as well.
I'd like to turn everyone's attention to this Diablo, though. 51 health, alive at 1 to Meteor. That's enormous, because of this taunt, Cairn in the way, Windfish can't even finish off the Diablo with the Samuro here. He also used the AoE on Samuro last turn, so he can't go over the taunt. And that could be crucial, potentially even game-winning for Luna. Although the positioning from Windfish is pretty smart here. The Samuro at 29 is just going to die to splash damage from Meteor anyway, if it were put on the side. So I like that it's put in the middle here to maybe stop one of the other minions from taking flank damage. For Luna, though, can she leverage the fact that her Diablo will live through the turn?
Is this actually a... oh, wait, what has happened here?
Both players playing Meteor? I mean,
oh yeah, because obviously it was 9, right? Yeah, but my brain was telling me that we would have seen Apocalypse then Meteor, but obviously it was slowed, right? So it's fine. It's me just being silly.
Yeah, no worries. Luna's Endurance Aura is off cooldown again, and it looks like there is another big speed tie in the works here, Raven, because if Windfish's Endurance Aura goes first, he's able to snipe off the Diablo before it deals the big Fire Stomps here. Is that even game-winning, though? Because if that's all he's doing with this turn, I guess Natalie could heal something a little bit. Is Luna then able to win with a Die Insects play? Not necessarily. Nothing's within the 22 breakpoint.
Yeah.
So I think she has to go for winning the tie and getting off enough Fire Stomps with her own Diablo. However, Windfish is playing around that possibility and so he's going for Natalie speed 2 here, so it limits the maximum number of Fire Stomps for Luna here down to 3. And that means that the Natalie, everything will be healthier.
Yeah, the quick heal as well on the Ragnaros is going to be nice just to top it up. That's the one most in danger of dying. And it's also arguably the higher damage output. Of course, Natalie against 2 reds is solid, but I think overall Ragnaros just gets more done here. There's Insect just hitting the Cairn. Arguably the worst target, I guess, for that. Although it does even it up across the board.
Very nicely done from Windfish. After he calculated that 3 Fire Stomps is not really putting any of his mercs in range of Die Insects, he just doesn't even try to take the speed tie. He just goes Earth Stomp. And now I think he has the game on lock here. Natalie can zap the Cairn before it moves, or it can zap the Ragnaros. And like Windfish can go for his own Die Insects and set up the kill for the next turn, I believe. Natalie Anathema also always goes off here, but yeah.
Oh.
There's so many ways to take this one down, but I love to see this. I think that Windfish and Valera, they've put themselves in a position where they've limited the amount of speed ties they have to win. Very, very few. And even in the situations where I was talking about you could take a tie, they didn't necessarily even go for it. They found a line where I can play around the situation where they get to do the big Fire Stomp combo and then just win 100% from that line. It's just so amazing to watch.
Yeah, it's so great. Like I said, in a comp that is generally considered one of the most rigid, they found something different to do, and guess what? You know, it seemed to work. So now I'm just looking forward to diving into the next game as well. So it's going to be pretty great overall, and it was just a really, really solid approach there from Team China, and I just think those openings, and it's what I was saying earlier, right? There's just so much to explore in the game. I think there are very few people who would have even attempted something like that.
We both thought that there's just so little flexibility to the opener of this Shadow Samuro deck when you're not running Cookie, right? Because it feels so weak to separate the Vol'jin and the Natalie, but they just kind of went back to basics in a way, which is like, if they know that their opponent's going to open blue, blue, green, let me open blue, green, green, and that just has the typing advantage and go from there. And on top of that, there is the high likelihood that Team America did not the player, Team Americas, did not necessarily focus on how to win versus that opener because they just didn't expect it. And so Team China could have gotten so many more reps in that matchup. Like, for all we know, Luna also had a way to win that versus that weird opener if she had labbed it out from the start, but there simply wasn't enough time to do that, and in preparation as well. So I just think that China have been leveraging the fact that this is their lineup. They know it inside and out. Because they're in first seed, they had some additional time at the beginning of the day as well to maybe come together with alternate openers. And so far, it's paid off in droves. But now, Raven, it comes down to perfect information on either side. It is Windfish's signature fire deck versus the Shadow Samuro.
Yeah, and this is going to be a really interesting one, right? Because generally speaking, I think so far that obviously we've seen the quality China have, and I think that although the Americas players have been playing very well as well, I think they might just be a little bit more rigid. I feel like we've seen from the, especially Americas, especially EU, more slip-ups than we've seen from China by a mile, right? China seems to be playing extremely solid. There's been way less times, I'll be honest, if any, that I can immediately recall, where I was thinking, oh, why did they do that? Because now they're just dead. Or, oh, they should have done this to do this. Whereas China seem to be always taking that extra step and doing the plays more that surprise us because they're outside of the box and work and make sense. Whereas we have seen a few times, the plays from all the other regions, honestly, just make a couple of slip-ups right there. So I do think, even though the power of the caster curse is real, especially from you, I do think China could well have it in the bag.
You know, Raven, being 0-2 down in Mercenaries Conquest format, at least for this specific tournament, is so different than how it is in Constructed. Because
that is true.
The information that you get by your opponent having one deck and you having three is not to be underestimated. Like, China have used that to amazing results so far. They've taken that advantage to go for openers that you might get punished for if there were several decks left on the other side. But if you know 100% that your opponent's gonna go for standard opener on the Shadow Samuro, you can do something a little bit different and catch them off guard, maybe get yourself some more percentage points, whether it be by that opener is just stronger or your opponent is less likely to know how to play against it. It's just not true in Constructed because all the deck lists are public at all points. The 2-2-2 color spread, once again, becoming so important given our deck list restrictions in this tournament.
Yeah, pretty clutch indeed, and we are getting ready to get into the game. And here's the big question mark, right? Shadow Samuro, a comp that every single, even relatively high-level Battleground player knows, right? Without question. Battleground, look, it's been a long few days with many modes going through my brain. Is any relatively good Mercenaries player will know this comp pretty much inside and out in isolation, right? For these 6 Mercenaries working together. Going up against this Geddon comp that Americas chose to submit themselves as well after the resubmission. So this is the tester. This is the big final last game to see who's going to come out on top in this Americas, I guess, best of, not even best of, but 2 matches of Mercenaries.
And I'm really curious how this one pans out because every time I think recently we've seen the turn 2 speed flip that we've already talked about be won by the side of the Fire comp, and it just doesn't even look close from that point. I want to see what Windfish has planned when he doesn't win the speed flip, right? Purely, Team China did not want to take these coin flip heavy matchups earlier on. That's why they went for these other openers, and it's worked out so far. So I believe that Windfish, even if he loses the 50-50, will have a plan for how to deal with this. Also, interestingly, that Luna went for Shadow Beam with Natalie on turn 1. That's why we see the Diablo at 8 instead of the Familiar 10. We usually see Anathema from that position. I wonder if that gives any implications, but he did win the speed tie here, and that could be the final nail in the coffin this early. I don't know. I think it's because Windfish is so good at this deck that, and he would have seen this situation like dozens of times now. I wonder if Luna can do anything unexpected to try and pull this one back.
Yeah, I am wondering at this point, you know the way if you max a Merc completely, you get bonus stats? Maybe if you max out the leaderboard as well on your specific region, you get bonus speed tie wins. Maybe that's how it works. We'll have to see with some more data to back that theory up. One thing that interests me a lot, though, about this this sort of Fire comp is what this next Merkin is going to be. It's going to be Ragnaros for this specific game, but I do think there's it feels like there's always arguments for any of them, right? You don't have a unnecessarily straightforward path to choose who's in that 4th point.
But look at that from Windfish. Just like 2 seconds, he's already taken his turn. You know this man has already played this matchup dozens of times. Maybe dozens is an understatement. I think I've just not seen this deck with the specific equipment on Diablo and Tavish for the comp anywhere on ladder. And I did not know it was a thing prior to this tournament. Like, I had seen Karen Diablo Varden opener quite commonly with Tavish on the bench, but just not with that particular equipment on the Diablo. And so it's an innovation that Team China have made so far. Team Americas have copied, but so far they're not in the mirror here. And Windfish is already looking confident, you know?
And I think it's really funny that, like, just judging from what we've seen, and if you've watched any previous Merc tournaments, I remember watching like the day 1 or day 2 tournament that happened, and it went so fast because everyone was like, lock in, lock in, lock in, go, end turn, finish, right, instantly. And here, although obviously Windfish isn't pressing end turn, we see like the bell curve, right? There's the newer players who are just like, yeah, this is just what I played, lock it in, go, don't really think. Then there's the players like, for example, like Luna, like many players that are good enough to know that you need to sit, work this out, run through the potential outcomes in your mind and then decide. So you take your time, you look at different options. And then there's Windfish who's like, no, I'm actually gone beyond that to be good enough to just know what the plan is almost instantly. So it's just very funny just to see how these players are going to line up here. But that was a pretty strong turn there for Luna, just bringing down a ton of health from Windfish. And now this Cairn is in a potential position where it might not be able to get much done this turn. Although with what's left over, it actually looks like this... the speed momentum, if you're Tice, can actually be played this turn, right? Without much interruption.
Yeah, none at all. It's a guarantee. But I was looking at that and thinking, okay, cold snap. But There's a rag on the other side, so the cold snap doesn't actually freeze anything. We've not seen the rag bug at all this tournament. I'm so happy about that. It looks like rag's just working normally with Sulfuras now. But Windfish is still just playing the cold snap, maybe just to get that extra damage. Nope, he goes back to the flurry. All right. I was wondering, because there's a world where you can argue you go cold snap if you think your Varden's just going to die this turn anyway. It's like 2 extra damage on everything. And we've seen at several points in this tournament, 1 or 2 damage can be the difference maker for getting a breakpoint for your next Smurf, for example. But I don't think Varden is guaranteed to die this turn, so I don't mind the flurry at all, just to make sure that you can continue to get those slows.
I also think as well, the slow, even if you think it's going to die, even if you lose technically a little bit more damage, I think the slow is a big deal, because if anything dies, you get to dictate the flow of the game in the next turn, because these are outside of the third mercenary for Windfish, it's a mirror match, right? It's Ken and Rag versus Ken and Rag, so you will just generally will be faster if you get multiple slows off. So yeah, I do like the slow overall. As it is, nothing died that turn for Windfish, and now you've got to say this is simply undoable here for Luna and Team Americas, right? Because there's already these 3. Varden's going to die, and yes, they won't freeze, but they'll do damage on death, which is then doubled because there's 2 reds. Then there's still 2 more mercenaries left, Tavish and Geddon, right? On the bench there for Windfish. It's absolutely huge. There's an absolute ton of damage available.
I just don't see it. I think Windfish came up with a deck that has 50% at least to win the game on the spot on turn 2, as long as you don't make some major blunders from that point. And it still has game, even if it loses that 50%er. We just haven't seen that situation very much, because I think Windfish, the deck is rewarding him because it belongs to him, right? He's been winning the turn 2 speed ties and not had to put himself in the position where it gets very difficult. But from here, it is quite clean, right? Even if you just press button 2 on Baron Geddon every turn, it's just gonna deal enough DPS, I think.
Yeah, it's just huge. It's just too much damage. The Ken's been popped, of course, so that 24 is the total amount of health you're going to see from Ken on Luna's side. There's still Tavish, and I think even just Tavish, like, going explosive shoot in a 1v1 could actually potentially get it done if these mercs get low enough as well. So you're going to see huge AoE come down. 3 total health now for the Ragnaros from Luna, and yeah, this is just going to be too much. Ragnaros, a naturally slow mercenary, one of the slowest overall in the game. That's going to be the concede. Windfish takes the victory. China get the reverse sweep, and not only that, the double victory in Mercenaries. And as usual with things like this, writing on paper never really works. So
they wrote in English. How considerate. Thank you.
Yeah. I understand. And you know what? That was convincing, and I think Team China have looked very, very strong overall in Mercenaries, and potentially, mainly because we got to see them more, I guess, in Your and Surrender's defense, but potentially just the strongest Mercenaries region overall by the looks of things.
I will not deny that by any means. I think they came into this with I'm still not sure if the best lineup, but I'd have to say by this point, because the Baron deck lineup, the Baron Geddon deck just seems very strong on multiple pilots. Like Frozen also learned it on the fly and made it work. That is probably the best lineup. I will make the exception that the Jaina deck is still very strong if specifically Surrender does it. It's trash if I'm playing it. So fair enough. Lineup goes to China. And on top of that, APAC might be second with original lineup, but in terms of play quality, we're probably, like, because of me, we're probably even below Europe and Americas, right? So it's just China all the way, because they had the preparation and they knew the meta. They knew different things they could do with the openers. They outplayed once they had the full information on the Samuro. And the best part is, Raven, I've broken my caster curse.
That was impressive. Okay, we'll change it. We'll have to find a way to fix this. We are done with Mercenaries, of course, but who do you think are going to win the Battleground segment and therefore win the whole thing? Come on, you've got to pick.
No.
Refuse.
I have done my job. Let me be happy for once, Raven. I've broken my curse. All I'm gonna say is that because China went 2-0 in Mercenaries and Americas went 2-0 in Constructed, it is one set of Battlegrounds, 3 lobbies for all the marbles, no tiebreakers to be had. I am just looking forward to watching it.
Okay, well, because of that completely rubbish response to my question, everyone, I want to see a disappointed in the chat for that one. But yeah, we'll have to see who takes it. There is just Battlegrounds left now, and as Gia, quite rightly told you, it's for all of the marbles this time. So the winner of Battlegrounds is going to decide the winner of the Hearthstone Global Invitational. Is America's going to continue to dominate, or is Team China going to recover at the last second? Who knows? Because I definitely don't. Thanks again to Gia for joining us. It was great to have you on after your great performance in the tournament, and great to talk Mercenaries with someone as well. Always a pleasure. And we're going to go to a break while we set up Battlegrounds, so don't go anywhere. Lorinda and Sottle will be here to take you through the final stage of the Hearthstone Global Invitational.